All right, Steve here, and I've begun to notice that as soon as I hit the record button, my tendency is to change my position to stand up and sit back down in the chair. And we'll see if at some point I stop doing that. So, this next part of this day's vignette, so I, I, I attempted to make part three, but I became really sneezy from having given the cat a kiss as I took it out to the kitty spa. And then when I came back in, my nose was stuffy. So it leads me to a story that when I was younger, I became severely allergic to cats to the point that I couldn't go into a house where they had cats because when I'd walk in, I'd start sneezing, my eyes would get red. If I touched a cat, I'd get hives. And then later on, when I got into a deeper level of healing work, I did some specific work with that memory of the trauma related to cats and then cleared my allergies to cats. So this is something that can happen when we release. Sometimes our symptoms that we experience have to do with an unresolved event. I would say frequently. And I would say our lifetime symptoms oftentimes have to do with an unresolved event. So one of the ways of resolving an event, just a typical one that comes up, we notice emotions rise up, intense emotions, and then we put the emotion, the story that kind of comes up with the emotions, if we can kind of observe it rather than get lost in it, then the story comes up and we feel the emotion of the story. And when we have them separate, and we might separate them further, then as we get them to a certain point of separation, it's easier to release the emotion. Then the story's typically not told again, because the reason for telling the story is to explain to people these strong emotions that have surfaced from them looking at us the wrong way or giving us the evil eye or whatever. Okay, that's starting this. These videos are kind of passing on the training that I got from the Hathors and from a number of other beings, the training of how to shift reality for ourselves by making changes, primarily by resolving energies of the past. And that, again, we just did the Mayan calendar reading, and that was about untying ourselves from the past. So that's one of the things that we're doing, is we're coming into the present by reading about the past. So I picked cards for today, and this is the card of the past, which is the Five of Swords, which has to do with defeat. And I won't make the joke about not having to do with the hands, or I did. But in the last one, which I decided not to use, the video 3, that is probably going into the trash. But the Five of Swords is fear of defeat or a memory of defeat. And here we have 5 bent swords, one of which has a handkerchief that's red with blood dripping from it. So that's kind of a gory idea, but it's there, and so I read it. But the handkerchief with the blood dripping from it is representative of negative thinking that opens an old wound. And as a result of opening that old wound, there is an experience of fear. Fear has one function, which is to constrict. All the twisted lines in the background are showing the function of fear, which is to constrict, to distort, to bend one's perspective or way of thinking. This is fear that history might repeat itself, or fear that one will be hurt again. Interesting, the astrological aspect of this card is Venus at the top of the head in Aquarius. The wavy lines at the bottom of the card. Basically, there are 2 fears held in the mind. One is fear that a new relationship may not work out, Venus in Aquarius. Or 2, having fear of moving in new directions that are emotionally important to you. The new directions are symbolized by Aquarius at the bottom of the card. And those directions being emotionally important to you is symbolized by Venus at the top of the card. Venus in Aquarius also symbolizes the emotional fears of what you might not attain that's important to you in this new direction. So you can think also that we got the Chariot card, and the Chariot card, the chariot driver is steering with the Wheel of Fortune, which has to do with, the Wheel of Fortune has to do with the ability to change states and directions by releasing the past, taking the ball out of the slot it was in, if you use a roulette wheel, and then you spin it and you drop the ball back in again, and it bounces around and it settles in something new. So we can use a little bit of the analogy of the roulette wheel. We can use the analogy of a steering wheel, like we're just shifting, subtly shifting directions, or radically shifting directions. If there's something where we really need to avoid something, we might have to radically shift. So that's the way I see that the Five of Swords is also related to the Wheel of Fortune. Like where we could take, we can be distracted, which becomes our past, but we can be distracted by our past based on our fears, based on choices we make out of fear, which are typically not our best choices unless we have an actual event, like somebody steps out in front of our car, and we go into fight or flight. We avoid hitting that person. That's when fear is very useful. And as this person was asked in the book I was reading, he's talking about delivering mail, and the dangers, once in a while you'll be chased by a dog, and the person says, well, what do you do when that happens? And he goes, run faster. So fight or flight, run faster. Try see if you can stay away from that dog. Maybe it just doesn't want you close to the property it feels like it needs to protect. Okay, so the past, we're coming out of fear. And let's just make it just simple. You can make up what you want, but I'm just going to make it up. So we're coming out of the fears of the past. What went wrong in the past that we never got over, and we're going to now begin to release all the fear as it shows up, whatever is triggering our fear. We're just releasing it, releasing it, releasing it, releasing it. Okay, the next card we got is the Three of Discs. And the Three of Discs, the word for the Three of Discs is work, the works. And the Three of Discs has to do with the capacity to give things a works. It represents persistence, tenacity, and getting clear on your priorities and commitments. Because it's a three. So there's three things: persistence, tenacity, and getting clear on your priorities and commitments. The symbol reflects the power of focus, priority, and commitments, which is represented by the pyramid. The three red wheels symbolize the alignment of mind, heart, and action. Clarity of what it is that you want to give your energy or the works to, and what it is that you don't want to give your energy to. It's symbolized by the blue light surrounding the pyramid. The lighted pyramid represents the power of intention and the clarity of priorities and commitments, which can break through any sense of confusion or obstruction, represented by all the gray waves in the background. The astrological aspect of this card is Mars in Capricorn. Mars is the planet of energy, vitality, and assertion. The Three of Discs is the assertion of mind, heart, and action, moving in the same direction. This kind of focus and intention allows things to be made tangible and secure, which is represented by the astrological sign of Capricorn, which is about getting things done. It's about functionality. I can tell you from 73 years of experience. Let's just get this done. Okay, that's the present. So the present is giving it our best, doing the work. committing, removing distractions to the best of our ability, like kitties, like putting the kitty in the spa and getting somewhat more focused. So the more we can, I'm going to give you a brief lesson, and the lesson is this. We've already heard in one of the other, or probably both of the other videos, that our words have power, the power of the spell. So what we say about ourselves is a spell on ourselves that might have been given to us as a gift by someone else. They might have given us a spell that might have led us to feel like we're not good enough, and maybe have the feeling that we'll never be good enough. And that could be a feeling from a spell that was given to us by someone else. But all of these spells, it's good for us to begin to listen to what we say. And a word that I used a number of times over the past few days is the term paranoid. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but I probably said something like, I'm naturally paranoid. And what I like to do is state that that is not a state that I choose for myself, that I choose to be in. And so I did a mild disservice to myself to state that I am naturally paranoid, and then we can shift it. So how would you shift it? Think about if you have said that thing about yourself, or I'm naturally fearful, or I'm always afraid, or any of those things. Paranoia, I think, has to do with fear of what one can't see. Afraid of the dark, afraid of the boogeyman, paranoid, not trusting anybody, distrust. And so I would say as one means to shift that is that I trust my own perceptions. I am not paranoid. I'm alert and alive to all possibilities. And when I find myself having energy holding me in one perspective, I release that energy, because I would like to see all the perspectives and be able to judge for myself through my mind, through my heart, through my actions, what might be the most useful thing for me. So there goes a little bit of, caught myself, but didn't judge myself too heavily, maybe judge myself a bit when I found myself using a word about myself that I felt was demeaning to me as a being. So that little process I just did was demonstrating how we can shift our relationship to ourself out loud to ourself. So we can just talk in the mirror if we want and say, I apologize for calling you paranoid, or for stating that it's natural to be paranoid. And I'm going to give you another message, which is it's good to be aware, awake, and alive to possibilities. So that shifts that. And maybe it shifted it for you, which is useful if it did. Okay, the future. What we got in the future, and we've got this before. The future is the hanged man. Now, sometimes people have some kind of negative energy towards the hangman or the tower. And the hangman and the tower kind of say the same thing. Like, things are not working the way they are, and it would be good to change. Now, if we create our own reality, and we look outside of ourselves at the reality that we have created, and we go, this is terrible. I did such a bad job. Or they did a bad job. Or the world is in such a mess. And if we have that perception, then it would be natural if we're in one of those create our own reality consciousness people. We'd go, oh, I feel so bad about this horrible reality I've created, which probably does nothing, is feeling bad about what we perceive that we've created. What does something is begin to look at oneself in ways in which we ask what might be useful to change. Like these glasses, because I keep thinking this like crooked glasses, and I keep thinking that'd be good to change. But what is it inside of us that would be useful to change? So the hangman invites you to do that. And the hangman, well, and I'm going to show you the works, the Three of Discs. I'm going to show it to you. So there's the works, because what I just talked about, but I didn't show you. And this is the hangman. It's a really interesting picture to me. And it's a major arcana. It's a trump card. And it's the 12 of trumps. And this is a saying, maybe a writing, because it's not in quotes, but by Alan Cohen, who I don't know who Alan Cohen is, and if you do, you could write it in the comment section. But Alan Cohen wrote or said, "The world would have you agree with its dismal dream of limitation. But the light would have you soar like the eagle of your sacred visions." That has a good feel to it. So the world would have you agree with its dismal dream of limitation, but the light would have you soar like the eagle of your sacred visions. This would be one to ponder. This will be one to ponder for me, and this may be one to ponder for you. What a quote about the principle of surrender and breaking old patterns. So the hangman represents the universal principle of recognizing and awakening to repetitive patterns that bind, limit, and restrict our growth and evolution. Have any of those? I've found a few in my closet, the closet of my mind. Like, you can't do that. Why? Nobody's done it before. So, well, then you can't do it, because you're not better than other people. You're not even as good as most people. You may be even worse than most people. Have you ever thought about that? Like, well, of course, we've probably all had a lot of stupid thoughts, but why do we keep them? Why do we keep repeating them? I'm not as dumb as I look. Like, great. But who are you on the deepest level of your being? And what have you come here to do? And are you doing it? I think it's important to ask better questions. Just not like, how can I fail again? It's not a good question. Or can things get any worse? Not a good question. Just, I think too many people have been asked that question. Can it get worse than this? Like, oh, I guess so. Recognizing and awakening to repetitive patterns that bind, limit, and restrict our growth and evolution. The hangman is the pattern breaker. In order to break limiting patterns, it's often necessary to take a distinctly different posture or stance or habit, such as turning ourselves upside down to get another view of a restrictive pattern or stuck place in consciousness that is being experienced. The hangman represents that state of consciousness which requires that we move beyond ego and trust the deeper aspects of who we are. Oh, like the deep self? Trust the deep self? There's a thought. Could be a spell. So, how well do you trust your deepest self? Notice what answer comes into your consciousness when you say that. How well do I trust my deepest self? And then I'm not going to say what came into my consciousness, which was lovely. I liked it very much. I'll maybe tell you later. But if you feel like doing this, when you asked, how well do I trust my deepest self? Write in the comments what answer you heard. It'll be interesting for all of us to know. We're all inquiring minds. Okay. The state of surrender and acceptance, which is the preliminary step required before we can free ourselves from destructive and limiting patterns that we experience in our lives. Often this symbol might be viewed as a crucifixion of the ego or of egoic patterns which are no longer constructive. The universal symbol associated with repetitive patterns is the labyrinth, represented by the squares within the background of this card. To use modern-day terms, the hangman reminds us that our hang-ups can either prevent our growth and evolution, or they can serve to teach us where we need to free ourselves from undue self-imposed limitations. This symbol ultimately teaches us that there are always more options, solutions, and perspectives to consider than those in which we are currently invested. The principle of surrender, breaking old patterns, which takes me to these final thoughts of this, I think the third video, or is this the fourth? I think this is the third video. Brings me to these final thoughts. In June, I think, of 2020, in the night school that I've been going to, the second night school, so anyway, it just doesn't matter. I graduated from the school for delinquent shaman. I think I graduated from it. Anyway, I found myself not going there anymore, so I dropped out or I graduated. I don't remember any graduation ceremony. But then I was in the school for energy awareness. And so in 2020, I was in the school for energy awareness, and they were talking about the 3 ways to change. So the 3 ways to change are changing our beliefs. And how we change our beliefs is when we're triggered. A lot of emotions come up when somebody looked at us the wrong way or said something in the wrong way or blah, blah, blah. And our stuff comes up. And with it is the story. You never loved me enough. You don't really care about me. Whatever it is that comes up for us. There's the story and the emotions about it. Oh, I feel terrible, and I may have to hurt you with my words or something to make you feel as bad as I feel, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the story, the emotions. You separate them as far as you need to separate them until you feel them come apart. And then you release the emotions. Then you release the story. That's one way to change. That's changing beliefs. Changing behaviors has to do with, I have the behavior, and behaviors oftentimes tie in with beliefs, but I have the behavior where I state about myself, I'm naturally paranoid. I'm naturally fearful. Whatever. And then you go, that's not a really good spell to place on yourself. Somebody else might have placed that on you before, but you keep repeating it, so you keep respelling it. You can say, this is changing a behavior. You can say, that's not a good thing for me to say. What I choose to say is I'm an aware person that is able to actively make changes in my behaviors. So there's a behavior changing a behavior with words about behavior. So there's the 3. So that's one way. Another way to change. So you can change in beliefs, you can change in behaviors, or you can change in boundaries. And a boundary change may be this. When I notice that there's somebody coming on really strong with their beliefs about the world, and they're wanting me to agree with them that it really is this way, we all should be fearful, we should all take our money out of the banks. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm just saying, like, when people are like, you should be afraid, you buy Bitcoin or whatever it is they're telling you, like, you got to do this, you got to be afraid, you can go, whoa, that's a boundary violation. Well, I'm a sovereign being. I can make choices. I can think about things and I can make choices. I can hold my boundaries with anyone. And I could say, wow, that sounds like a really emotionally charged belief. Do you want to keep it? And the person goes, they go wherever they go with that. That's one thing you can do. But you hold some boundaries with people. And you can say, I know, and I've done this many a times. I'll say to a loved one, I'll say, I understand this is what you are saying that you believe. And people think that they'll feel better if somebody else agrees with them and says, I believe that too. And yet, I'm not that person. So I'm not going to agree with that perception because you want me to. And I actually don't agree with that perception. And I think that particular, and you don't have to say all this stuff, but I do sometimes. I'll say, and I think that perception has a lot of emotional charge. So if you'd be willing to release that emotional charge from that perception, and then talk to me about that perception without the emotional charge, it'd be much easier to consider that perception of reality. But when you talk about it with all that emotional charge, it makes me think you're talking about a belief from an unresolved event of the past. And I would suggest you resolve that event so you don't feel like you have to be spewing your vindictive energy on someone that apparently cares for you as they have been living with you for some period of time or whatever, you know? But we want to be careful with all this. We want to be thoughtful if we can. We want to be true with our words. So the last part of this is there are 4 agreements. They're simple. You can buy the book. It's called The 4 Agreements. And the agreements are simple. 1, this may not all be in correct order. I don't know if there is a correct order for the 4 agreements, but it will be the 4 agreements. So 1, be impeccable with your words. Just think about that and then take action on it and do it. If you find words that you don't feel are impeccable, then just don't speak them. Speak words that you're impeccable. They're impeccably your words. Be impeccable with your words. Do your best. Your best. Just do your best. Don't assume that you actually know what's going on. And I added that, but it's just don't assume. And don't take it personally. In the past, don't take it personally was the most difficult one for me. And I am just getting better and better with that every moment of my life henceforth. Yeah, I don't see the value. If I am taking it personally, more than likely I'm being triggered by something someone said. And that means I have some energy around it that I can let go of. So I can say, thank you. That's very useful in helping me release this limited perception about myself. You just call me the hanged man. All right. I thought that one was good. I'm going to watch it probably multiple times. I'm probably going to watch it a lot more than you do because I find that these messages that come through me, they are for you and they are for me. These messages are to help me in my changes. And I think that we're going to do one more thing here, one more video possibly, and it's going to be about setting up a healing field and going back to an event from the past that would be useful to release and integrate at this time. And I have a feeling that we're going to go back to the explosion of the Hathor planet. I've been back to this thing hundreds of times with people who needed to clear it. And I think we're going to do it as a giant group event. So I almost would like to do it live, but I don't know how to do that yet. And so at some point we may do some event live where all of us are together clearing some event. That's really exciting to me. That will happen. I'll set the intention that will happen. We'll do a live healing event and we'll all participate in it. and then afterwards, possibly people will share what they experienced, because a lot of people are really psychic and they see the event, and it doesn't matter if we all see the same event. As long as we feel like we've cleared some energy, that's all that really matters. Okay. Um, yeah, so that might have been number 3, and whatever it was, a namasko.